The enrollment forge now requires techniques more akin to micro-welding, strategies that respond to the fractures at the individual level, not just the institutional one. Welcome to the Innovation Forge. In today's episode, we visit the great Enrollpression through the Forge Bellows. Let's see how innovation meets artistry as we forge something extraordinary together.
You are listening to the Innovation Forge, the #1 podcast on adaptive enrollment management, exploring the data, marketing, and strategy that fuels higher education. Here's your host, David Dysart.
Hello, Guilders, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Forge. I am your host, David Dysart, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on this journey into the innovative world of higher education and adaptive enrollment management. Chapter 2, The Warped Intake, FAFSA Collapse, and the Pipeline Breakdown. In every forge, the bellows are sacred. They control the air, shape the fire, and set the rhythm of the work. When they fail, when the air chokes, when the timing stutters, the entire process falters. Heat doesn't reach the metal, hammer strikes miss their mark, and the workpiece cools in the wrong form. That is the state of enrollment after the 2023-2024 FAFSA cycle, and in the wake of continued disruptions in financial aid, Department of Education, and other similar hurricanes. This chapter enters the forge during a misfire. The redesigned FAFSA, meant to streamline access and modernize aid, instead buckled under its own weight. What should have been a cleaner intake valve became a jammed bellows, choking off application momentum, delaying critical decisions, and obscuring visibility for students and institutions alike. The damage wasn't theoretical, it was personal and uneven. Low-income and first-generation students, the ones who depend on FAFSA access the most, were hit the hardest. Trusted systems turned silent. Aid estimates went missing. Timelines that once guided decision-making became unreliable and, in some cases, irrelevant. Inside these pages, you'll find reporting that reveals how misaligned federal systems threw off institutional models, destabilized yield projections, and ignited burnout in offices already stretched thin. But you also see the deeper truth. Our infrastructure was never designed to endure timing failure at this scale. FAFSA's collapse simply exposed what was already brittle. This chapter challenges us to do more than react. It asks us to treat intake as more than a form-filling moment. It is a structural component of enrollment strategy, a process that must now be reforged with flexibility, equity, and resilience at its core. The bellows have jammed, the timeline is warped, but the fire still burns. Welcome to Chapter 2. Let's keep forging. The jammed bellows, FAFSA collapse, and the enrollment engine. Article, Running Out of Road for FAFSA Completion, by Inside Higher Ed, Liam Knox. Every forge relies on airflow. Without it, even the hottest coals cool. In enrollment strategy, that airflow is the application pipeline and the FAFSA. For millions of students, this is the oxygen intake. When it stalls, the whole system suffocates. Inside Higher Ed's coverage of the FAFSA crisis outlines just how far the damage has spread. A sharp, unexpected drop in FAFSA completions, especially among low-income and first-generation students, has created a high-pressure blockage at the front end of the enrollment furnace. Numbers suggest year-over-year declines in completions topping 30% in some states. This isn't just a processing error, it's systemic failure. The article details both the technical missteps, the delayed launch, data errors, processing lags, and the human consequences. Financial aid access was already the most fragile bridge in the college decision-making journey. This year, the bridge collapsed mid-crossing. Students who depend most on aid have faced the most uncertainty. Counselors and admissions teams were left scrambling. Institutions still don't have a reliable view of yield risk. At the Forge, we read this not as a one-year disruption, but as a pressure test of the system's weakest seams. FAFSA completions was never just a form. It's the structural hinge between aspiration and access. The current failure has exposed how much our current application pipeline depends on synchronized timing, functional federal tools, and proactive communication. Without these, students drift and institutions guess. This moment has also unmasked the fragility of our data-informed strategies. Predictive models built on prior years' behavior are now off-kilter. Timelines are misaligned, messaging cadences are misfiring. When the front-end take valve fails, the back-end yield forge loses its feed. Blueprint breakdown. Rebuilding FAFSA contingency playbook. Every institution should prepare a dual cycle model for FAFSA instability that includes adjusted timelines, emergency aid communication, and more flexibility in verification outreach. Rewire communications to anticipate bureaucratic failure. Don't just assume students will receive information from official sources. Build proactive nudges that demystify and de-stress the aid process, especially for first-gen families. Track FAFSA completion by segment. Monitor FAFSA submission rates by region, income band, and high school. Use real-time data to adjust visit follow-ups, calling campaigns, and counselor outreach. Update predictive models to account for FAFSA volatility. Models that assume FAFSA equals intent may now over-predict interest. Build alternate scenarios that account for incomplete or delayed filings. Create strategic flex and yield infrastructure. Rebuild yield strategies that can adapt mid-cycle without relying on hard FAFSA benchmarks. Include quick deploy interventions and modular campaign assets. This FAFSA breakdown is not a standalone crisis. It's a perfect illustration of the great enrollpression, where multiple systems falter at once, and institutions must absorb the shock without clear lines of support. The danger isn't just that students didn't file, it's that our tools were never built to endure a malfunction at this scale. The bellows have jammed, but the fire must stay lit. Let's keep forging. Misfired mechanisms. FAFSA reform and the application pipeline breakdown. Article. New FAFSA form may trigger drop in college enrollment. Publisher, PPIC. Selena Gomez and Kevin Cook. In the smithy, even the best hammer becomes dangerous if swung offbeat. The redesigned FAFSA was meant to be a cleaner tool. Streamlined, modernized, student-friendly, but as PPC's articles reveal, the timing of its release and the hidden friction beneath its surface have disrupted the entire admissions workflow. The strike came late, and it landed wrong. PPIC outlines how delayed data processing, new eligibility metrics, and shifting definitions of need have contributed to widespread uncertainty. The very students that the redesign was intended to help, low income, first generation, and underserved, are now caught in a knowledge vacuum. Completion rates are falling, aid packages are delayed, decisions are postponed, and enrollment signals have gone quiet. This isn't a story of malicious design. It's one of mismatched timing and underestimated complexity. FAFSA isn't just a form. It's a hinge in the enrollment forge, connecting students' financial readiness to the institutional scaffolding of aid offers, decision letters, and onboarding pipelines. When the hinge slips, the gates do not open. When PPIC's analysis does well, it is highlighting the cascading nature of FAFSA delays. In a cycle where timing and trust are everything, misfires at the federal level ripple into confusion at the family level and chaos at the institutional level. Application counts may remain steady on the surface, but true intent is murkier than ever. At the Innovation Forge, we argue this is not simply a FAFSA problem. It's a system fragility problem as we continually hit barriers with the financial aid process. The enrollment machinery has long depended on assumptions that timing would hold, definitions would remain stable, and systems would speak to each other. This cycle exposed just how brittle that dependency has become. The new FAFSA may be better in theory, but in a year of implementation, the Forge can't run on theory alone. Blueprint breakdown. Adjust enrollment communications for FAFSA disruptions. Plan for multiple waves of aid-related messaging, not just a one-time release. Speak to the uncertainty and offer clarity even when the data isn't final. Integrate FAFSA status into CRM strategy. If you aren't tracking FAFSA submission and completion within your system, you're guessing about financial readiness. Build triggers that link FAFSA status to nudges and counselor follow-up. Train yield teams to speak aid fluently. Ensure that frontline staff can walk families through FAFSA status, expected changes, and new eligibility rules. They must be financial translators, not just recruiters. Use predictive modeling to spot at-risk segments early. Completion gaps won't hit all students equally. Identify the segments that typically file early or rely heavily on aid to prioritize outreach. Recalibrate deposit and melt expectations. Anticipate a noisier yield season. Create models that adjust melt forecasts based on FAFSA volatility, not just historic behavior. This FAFSA cycle reveals another pressure point in the Great Enrollpression. When one tool shifts, the whole bench feels it. It isn't just about getting students to file, it's about designing a system resilient enough to hold when the form, the formula, or the furnace itself falters. The hinge slipped, but the forge must hold. Let's keep forging. Fractured flow, uneven impact in the FAFSA fallout. Article, how did the bungled FAFSA rollout affect American students? It depends on who you look at. Publisher, MarketWatch, Jillian Berman. Not all cracks spread the same. In metalwork, pressure fractures will follow the weakest points. Areas where the composition is thinner, less reinforced, or under hidden stress. The FAFSA breakdown followed a similar path. As MarketWatch reports, the blow landed hardest not across the system evenly, but along long lines of equity, access, and timing. The article offers a sobering assessment. While FAFSA delays and errors disrupted everyone, the damage was not uniformly distributed. Students with access to support systems, high school counselors, and prior experience with the aid process were better able to adapt. But for many low-income and first-generation students, this was their only window, and it was obscured by a fog of silence. Enrollment numbers are already starting to show the effects. Some institutions are reporting year-over-year declines and many fear late surprises in the summer melt. The FAFSA form was meant to simplify the process. Instead, it introduced a new type of complexity, informational gaps that affected some students far more than others. And this is where adaptive enrollment management must become precision work. Broad stroke responses won't be enough. The enrollment forge is now requiring techniques more akin to micro-welding, strategies that respond to the fractures at the individual level, not just the institutional one. At the forge, we see this as a clear challenge of equity design. The FAFSA form is not a universal tool if it leaves certain groups systematically more vulnerable to disruption. Similarly, our outreach, data models, and enrollment practices must be sharpened to detect and respond where the signal has gone quiet. What's most concerning about this article is the long-term implication. Students who missed the cycle may not simply defer, many may disappear. If their first brush with college bureaucracy is this chaotic, the likelihood that they try again drops sharply. Blueprint breakdown. Layer your data by equity segment. Don't treat FAFSA completion rates as flat metrics. Disaggregate by first-gen status, income band, and high school FAFSA penetration. Target response strategies accordingly. Create flexible on-ramps beyond the FAFSA season. For students who missed the cycle entirely, build re-entry points in late summer and early fall. Extend aid timelines where possible. Equip counselors with targeted recovery tools. Provide scripts, outreach workflows, and FAQ resources focused on FAFSA recovery efforts for vulnerable student groups. Adapt yield strategy to expect gaps in intent. FAFSA data is no longer cleanly tracks with intent to enroll. Use additional signals like engagement behavior, counselor interaction, and application status to recalibrate your outreach. Document the impact for internal advocacy. Collect and share stories from affected students. Use them to inform institutional policy changes, budget adjustments, and public messaging. This FAFSA cycle reveals yet another dynamic of the Great Enrollpression, the uneven collapse. Not all students have the same insulation, not all disruptions land equally, and not all strategies will work across fractured ground. We must now forge tools that reach into the cracks, not just polish the surface. Precision isn't a luxury, it's a survival skill. Let's keep forging. Forged uneven. When the system melts, the margins hit first. Article. The FAFSA rollout mess hurt low-income students the most. Publisher, Teen Vogue and Economic Hardship Reporting Project, Bobby Dempsey. A forge must heat evenly. When the flame is too strong in one spot, too weak in another, the metal warps. In this FAFSA cycle, the uneven heat didn't just deform the process, it left some students behind entirely. Teen Vogue's reporting centers those voices, reminding us that the failure wasn't technical alone, it was moral. This article strikes deep. Those student testimonials and counselor... And this article strikes deep. Through student testimonials and counselor accounts, this piece illustrates what enrollment leaders already feared. Low-income students encountered a wall of confusion, missed critical deadlines, and often lacked the adult guidance to decode the chaos. FAFSA delays weren't an inconvenience for these students. They were a stop sign, and for many, no detour was in sight. At the Innovation Forge, we believe enrollment strategy must be as much about the unseen pressure points as the visible outcomes. A yield curve tells one story, a missed deadline tells another, and for low-income students, the FAFSA form isn't just a step, it is the key to the door. This cycle revealed what happens when the lock breaks mid-term. This also highlights the structural imbalance in outreach. FAFSA confusion was compounded by digital divides, lack of advisor capacity, and a national messaging failure. The FAFSA didn't fail equally, it failed exactly where the system has always been most brittle. In response, institutions must not simply refine their playbooks, they must rewrite them with equity as a central constraint. Not every student has a family advocate. Not every student checks their email. Not every student knows when they're even behind, and when they will fall off the map. Our enrollment systems too often fail to trace the smoke. Blueprint breakdown. Rebuild FAFSA campaigns around trust, not just deadlines. Deliver messaging through the channels students actually use. From text to social to school-based outreach. Lead with clarity and empathy. Add equity-focused tracking flags to your CRM. Monitor FAFSA completion alongside first gen, Pell eligible, etc. Build automation that prioritizes recovery outreach for those most affected. Create emergency aid exception paths. Develop internal policies that allow for aid extensions or alternate documentation when students miss filing due to systemic barriers. Deploy summer recovery blitzes for at-risk populations. July and August must now include FAFSA re-engagement workflows, mobilize counselor corps and peer mentors, and pop-up virtual help centers. July and August are prime for re-engagement workflows. Mobilize counselor corps, peer mentors, and pop-up virtual help centers. Design systems that assume less access, not more. Design every yield and aid process around students without laptops, stable Wi-Fi, or adult advocates. If your model depends on privilege, it's already broken. This article takes us into one of the most personal facets of the Great Enrollpression. Not just the collapse of systems, but the erosion of trust. It is one thing for a form to break. It is another for a student to believe college was never meant for them. Access isn't promised. It's forged. Let's keep forging. Warp timelines. FAFSA fallout and the indecision forge. Article. Rapid report. FAFSA delay student impact survey. By Carnegie. A skilled blacksmith knows timing isn't just helpful, it's essential. Heat too long and the metal warps. Strike too soon and it cracks. In the 2023-2024 enrollment cycle, the FAFSA delays reshaped the academic year into a warped, unpredictable sequence, where neither students nor institutions could strike with certainty. Carnegie's white paper, Rapid Report, FAFSA Delay Student Impact Survey, captures what many enrollment leaders experienced firsthand but had little time to articulate. The chaos didn't end with the form's release. It stretched well into what should have been a stable close to the cycle. May 1st lost its meaning. June came with more unknowns than confirmations. The delays created a new kind of decision paralysis. Students who normally would have deposited earlier held off, uncertain whether their aid would appear, whether offers would be honored, or whether plans needed to be changed entirely. This delay in decision was not uniform across student populations and geographies. Moving from the student survey covered in the article, colleges lost visibility into the enrollment curve. Deposit forecasting became guesswork, yield modeling loses traction, even high-confidence admits can become maybes. There's also the human toll. Burnout among enrollment professionals, late-stage scramble on aid packaging, and the emotional labor of re-recruiting students who are already in February, There's also the human toll. Burnout among enrollment professionals, late-stage scramble on aid packaging, and the emotional labor of re-recruiting students who are ready in February, but adrift by June. Many teams weren't just shifting tactics, they were running dual cycles simultaneously, building fall enrollment while patching the spring fractures. At the Forge, we see this as more than a paperwork disruption. It is a collapse in shared tempo. Enrollment management depends on synchronized rhythm, outreach, application, aid, decision, melt prevention. FAFSA's breakdown didn't just misfire one cog. It sent tremors through the entire machine, and yet the Smiths kept working to patch timelines, build stopgap tools, and hold tension in systems never meant to stretch this far. This is why adaptive enrollment management is no longer optional. It's the only way to function when the Forge runs hot beyond the plan. Blueprint breakdown. Rebuild enrollment calendars for fluid decision points. May 1 and June 1st are no longer hard stops. Create rolling workflows that account for prolonged indecision, late FAFSA data, and emergent deposits. Designed for parallel cycle recovery. Assume your team will need to run early prep for the next cycles, while still cleaning up the current one. Build in task allocation, automation, and clear handoffs. Develop indecision scoring metrics. Track behaviors that signal uncertainty. Delayed housing forms, no orientation registration, etc. Flag and engage these students differently. Build emotional resilience into team management. Acknowledge the burnout. Rotate staff roles, provide space for rest, and reset expectations for what normal now means in a post-cliff cycle. Create summer forward yield assets. The cycle now runs long. Create messaging, events, and virtual resources specifically for late decision makers who still need confidence and clarity. This white paper closes a crucial chapter in the FAFSA disruption narrative, the aftermath. The forum may have launched in winter, but the stress carried into summer. It's one more symptom of the great enrollpression, where calendar reliability, institutional stamina, and student clarity all fracture under pressure. We can't rewind time, but we can rebuild tempo. Let's keep forging. The warped intake, when timing falters and the pipeline bends. In the Forge, the Bellows do more than push air. They set the tempo. When they stall or misfire, every step downstream wavers. This chapter traces one of the most critical timing failures higher education has experienced in recent memory, the FAFSA collapse of 2023-2024, and its cascading impact across the enrollment workshop. The articles and analysis in this section captured a truth many campuses were forced to live. Our intake system is only as strong as its weakest hinge. FAFSA was never just a form. It was the gatekeeper to access, a load-bearing point in our application pipeline, and a keystone to our predictive infrastructure. When the hinge slipped, the whole frame flexed under pressure. Some students paused, others disappeared. Institutions scrambled to resync communications, rebuild trust, and reassemble workflows that had relied too heavily on consistency that no longer existed. What we've seen is not only a temporary disruption. What we've seen What we've seen is not only a temporary disruption, it's a reminder that our systems were built on fragile synchronization and silent assumptions. The FAFSA crisis simply struck the seam first. As adaptive enrollment managers, we must now move beyond contingency plans. We must forge systems that bend, not break. And outreach strategies that flow with uneven timelines, not against them. This is not about repairing a form. It's about recasting the intake pipeline for an age of volatility. Blueprint breakdown. Rebuild the intake process around flex timing. Adapt calendars and milestones for multi-wave engagement. Designed for decision-making that stretches past traditional cutoffs. Elevate FAFSA as a frontline metric. Track completion, status, and segmentation within your CRM. Treat FAFSA data like enrollment telemetry, not just a compliance step. Design yield for uncertainty. Develop campaigns, events, and support assets for students in limbo. Provide clear pathways even when information is partial. Center equity in all response models. Ensure your FAFSA recovery strategy addresses who was hit hardest. If your system only works for the well-supported, it's not ready. Model the downstream effects of application instability. Build predictive tools that account for delayed intent signals and incomplete data. Recalibrate yield and melt and revenue forecasting with volatility in mind. The Forge will not wait for the calendar to normalize. Our students can't either. This moment calls for more than troubleshooting. It requires strategic recasting of how we build, sustain, and adapt the entire enrollment pipeline. The Bellows misfired, but the fire remains. Let's keep forging. If you enjoyed today's episode, please grow the guild by rating and reviewing the Innovation Forge podcast or sharing it with a colleague who needs to hear about these creative crossovers in education. The best review or comment every month will get an ebook of my book, of course. Particularly great ones will also be featured on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the workshop today. Remember to strike true, and let's forge something extraordinary together.
I clicked submit, and then nothing. Portal silent, aid unseen. School said wait, I waited. Calendar cracked like a blade. 12 calls a day, and still no keys. Essay failed, no clarity. Just help me file. They cry and plead, but I don't know what help they need. Bellows jammed, no air to feed. Sparks still glow, but not with speed. The forge misfires, the intake bends. We patch, we push, we mend again. FAFSA fail, but we remain. Bellows jammed, but still we flame. My model broke at line 16. No aid file, no yield to glean. The funnel warped, the inbox froze. The melt came early, nobody knows. Late data, no status, partial file, wrong campus. Who are we helping? How do we know? Where is the signal? Will they still go? Bellows jammed, the heat runs wild. Still we swing for flame. Bellows jammed, and still we flame. We forge what we can, even when the